introductory comments. Let's talk about mental health. You know, mental health is a very intimate subject. You know, everybody got issues. Yeah, everybody, including me. The things that we go through in life. But it's how do we deal with them? The things that we can prevent from going off the edge, and for those things where you get caught and you need a little intervention. So I think our panel is going to be great for you guys. Again, preventive versus intervention, but at the same point, bringing resources. Because that's important. A lot of times I meet people all the time. There's not an Uber driver, one of my citizens at my satellite office right there on Thornton Road, I don't bump into. We talk about family matters. Tonight is not about the board of commissioner at some high level and stuff, talk about transportation. This is where your family is. These are your neighbors, things that go on in your life. And we're going to try to create this atmosphere that we can get into and sort of peel that onion, talk about the resources. See, it's easy for me to talk about my eyes, because it's physical. I get it. But don't get alone. That's traumatic. Can you imagine what the depression I may go through being blind, trying to navigate and do what I do? If you're a detective or somebody out there, you're doing whatever you guys are doing out there, and you've got to do this with your eyes closed. You have to adapt and you have to evolve. Now, that's internal, but then there's trauma that happens on the outside that you have to deal with. I mean, family members, co-workers, whatever the case may be, just life. And so we're going to get into these things to try to avoid catastrophe. Hopefully we can get into that. Now, we've got some intervention. I know I've got some experts here. I'm going to bring up Director Sandra Williams, and she's going to talk about this facility that we're in right now, which I think is a very beautiful facility. But we're going to talk about the resources that are necessary, because it's easy to talk about mental health. I don't like having conversations too much, because I'm like, okay, let's get at it. Let's get an action plan. You know, how do you evolve your life? How do you deal with this? I mean, it's the coping. We're going to talk about substance abuse. We're going to talk about that. I mean, think about it. People who drink, 110 million people. It's about coping, the hard drugs. How do you deal with life? How do you shape that? Let's keep this real. And I'm going to have a great conversation with my panelists, but it's something that this is dear to my heart. I mean, we started this back in 2018. And during that time period, this is back in the day, 8 years ago. And it was one of those where at that time, when we talked about mental health, I remember when I first came into office back in 2008, and I used to talk to Judge McClain, Judge Emerson, and Judge James. And every year I met in the budget process, and I said, okay, guys, but why we got to give people 25 years of life? Why can't we do these things? And he says, well, Chief Judge at the time, Judge James said, well, Commissioner Robinson, we don't have any alternative sentencing options. I said, oh, so how do we deal with that? He says, well, got to take that up with the state. Well, obviously, I'm down in Savannah one time, like I just came from, 2 weeks ago, and I'm at this big panel about 400 people, and they talked about the need that, oh my God, it's getting expensive. You give people 20, 30 years, now we got to pay for them coming out. How do we deal with reentry? How do we deal with those matters? And I'm like, oh, this is economic. Okay, so, all right, but now they created these courts, which I think Governor Deal and his son out of Hall County was a great idea. I'm like, okay, every now and then, Governor gets it. Every now and then, get it right. That was a great program. Now we got mental health courts. We got accountability courts that deals with drug, DUI, veterans. Now we cooking. Everything is not a box. Everybody doesn't need to go to jail. The question is, how do we deal with that as a society? How do we open our eyes and see that there's other people that operate differently? So we think we're going to get into this thing today. I think we're on the right task. I'm going to yield right now because I don't want to belabor the moment. I'll come back later to help facilitate questions during the Q&A. And of course, I'll close this out. But again, we welcome all of you guys that are here today, but specifically those people that are online. Obviously, this is recorded for later, if in fact you want to come back later. But we've got a great show right now. So with no further ado, I'm going to yield the floor and bring up Assistant Director of CSB, Sandra Williams. Sandra, where are you at? Right. Come on up. Thank you, madam. You got this.
Thank you.
Where am I going?
Well, thank you all for being here. Welcome. So as Commissioner Robinson was saying, yes, we're going to talk about mental health, substance use, criminal justice reform, reentry. That's our conversation for tonight. So hopefully you guys are prepared and you have questions yourself. I know I have some questions for everyone. But before we introduce the panel, let me tell you about this beautiful center that we're in. This is our Youth Innovation Center. This center is designed for our youth in Douglas County because we have a gap of missing services and activities for our youth. So this was built to provide structure and unstructured activities for youth who needs assistance with any type of serious emotional disturbance. So people say, what is serious emotional disturbance? All of us have that. We've all had some type of emotional disturbance that we've dealt with, some type of trauma that we've dealt with. So it's never one person is more severe than the other or one person has more issues than the other. We all deal with mental issues. We've all had some type childhood trauma, adult trauma that we're currently dealing with. This is the safe space for our kids to come to. So thank you all again for joining. Before we get into it and with the questions and everything, I'm going to go ahead and let the panel introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Lieutenant Pounds, and then we'll just go down the line.
Good evening. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Tavarius Pounds. I've been with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office for 20 years.
Thank you. I want to first start by thanking Commissioner Robertson because let's give him a hand. He has had this event yearly, annually, and I've come to it every opportunity that I can. I am Representative Kimberly Alexander. I have District 66, which encompasses most of Douglas County, but is the central areas of Douglas County. So if you're in the central part of Douglas County, I am probably your state representative, so I'm happy to be here.
My name is Tara Nichols, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Nichols Center. We're a nonprofit that helps families heal through wellness and recovery.
I'm Cindy Burnett, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Never Alone Clubhouse Recovery Community Organization.
Good evening. My name is Katrina Harley. I am the Douglas County E911 Director.
And finally, I am Kelly Robinson. I do represent the 2nd District of Douglas County, which is the Eastern Wall, but I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge Madam Vice Chair Tournia Carthen, who's in the audience. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. Commissioner Carthen, would you like to come up and introduce yourself as well?
Good evening, everyone. I am, as I said, Vice Chair Commissioner Carthen. I am excited about this panel. I wanted to come not only as the commissioner to represent my district, but I wanted to come as a constituent and a community partner. I want to see what resources there are and what issues and possible solutions that we have. So I hope tonight you will enjoy what the panel has to say, and let's get some of these resources into the community and help out our citizens and our neighbors. That's what it's all about. At the end of the day, we're all connected. If we stay here, we're connected. We are our brother's keepers. So just excited, and thank you, Commissioner Robinson, for putting us together again.
Thank you. Before we get into questions, I would like to bring to the floor Senator Alexander just to discuss our mental health bill. For those who do not know, there was a mental health bill that was passed. So I would love for her to come to the floor and talk more about that so we can all learn about this bill before we get more into the conversation, because that will help us to understand why we're having this conversation.
She elevated me a little bit, Senator. Representative. So in 2022, everyone know we had this big, huge bill that came through the House that was a House parity bill. That bill passed, and so that was an overhaul to actually the mental health care. Everyone was so proud about what happened with that bill. What that bill basically did is it basically said that it aims to look at the insurance companies and how much they cover the mental health and relate it to the physical health that we have. We have yet to see what may have occurred with that bill, and agencies share information about patients. We definitely need to have that. It also was going to create for state agencies to share information both with the mental health providers and law enforcement. We know that needs to happen. It also was looking at those individuals, that familiar faces that you continue to see, that get arrested, that get into the system. So that was going to be that bill that did that. Very good bill, passed out of the House, got over to the Senate. Once it happens and it gets over to the Senate, there's a number of things that happen and occur. So one of the things that they did once it got over to the Senate, of course, it didn't pass out, so it didn't go anywhere. But once it got over to the Senate, what they did was is they took out the sections that deal with the policy that address housing for people with criminal background due to mental illness related arrests. So that happens a lot. You'll get a bill that'll pass out of the House to get to the Senate and it won't go anywhere because they either take out something or it get added on to additional things. There were at least 4 more bills that I just think is important for people to know about that we are trying to pass these bills down at the General Assembly. HB 141, which would have required suicide screenings for students between the age of 8 and 18. Good bill. HB 451, which provides financial resources to first responders experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. HR 232 creates another House study committee for evaluating, simplifying, and eliminating duplication of regulatory requirements for mental health and social services providers. HB 8 requires a state board of education to add circumstances having to do with mental and behavioral health as acceptable excuses to its mandatory attendance policy. And the last one was HB 184, which mandates that any health insurer that provides mental health or substance abuse coverage must provide it in any plan that the insurer offers. So all of those are good bills. Hopefully we'll come back next year and we'll be able to get those bills passed. One of the very, very first bills that I passed was a House Study Committee on mental health. And so we will continue to keep pushing and hopefully we'll be successful next year.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, yes, we have a lot of mental health bills that we need to pass, even more, not just one, because it's needed, because mental health, substance use, it's all kind of overlooked, it's kind of put on the back burner. So passing these bills, go to your local legislative, talk to your Congress, and support getting these bills supported, passed, because it's definitely needed. And as you know, we see here in Douglas County, we have our new co-responder program. And through that program, we're now able to, through 911, through EMT and law enforcement, help our individuals in our own community with mental health issues, substance abuse issues, trauma, all of that. We're able to do that through the CSB, 911, and EMT. So with that being said, I do have questions for the panel, and anyone can jump in. But what do you all see as the socioeconomic crisis, or the reason why people commit crimes or even have crisis? What do you see as the reason behind that?
Equality is one. Lack of education, unemployment or underemployment, discrimination and social exclusion, substance abuse and addiction, family background and social support, neighborhood and community factors as well, and peer influence. We see a lot of people committing crimes simply because they don't have the money or the means to do or have the things that they want to have in life. So a lot of them is going in cars and robbing people for guns, purses, or whatever things of value that they can get, for whether it be just to make ends meet, whether it's to pay off bills, whether it's just for the thrill of the crime. But there's various reasons why they do what they do, but these are the ones that stick out the most.
I know, so I won't hold it, but then somebody else might want to talk. I just want to be mindful too that, so I was on a panel probably about 3 weeks ago. I know when there are mass shootings and sometimes it has something to do with somebody and they'll say it's mental health. We have to be mindful and careful about every time there's a mass shooting that we're labeling those individuals with mental health. If they have mental health, we need to be getting them the help that they need. That's what we need to do. But it's also an issue with guns. And so by us putting those two together, it takes the focus off of actually really these guns. So you will hear a lot of people say, oh, it's a lot of people that are doing mass shootings that have mental illness. That's only a small amount. So we just have to be careful about that too, making sure that those people that do have mental health are getting the help that they need. But, with these mass shootings, it's a lot to do with access to guns also.
Yeah, if I can join in, and I appreciate Lieutenant Colonel Pounds' 6 or 7 things that he mentioned. Because at the end of the day, it's always about money. This is America. It's about who gets fed and who doesn't. It's about, do I conserve resources just for myself, or am I sharing with my neighbors? And it's the frequency of that distribution. So it's one of those like, yeah, at the end, I hear it. But everybody wants a quality of life. All we want to do is be able to duplicate life, keep moving in life, live our lives. Whether you're here 50 years, 60 years, or 70 years. You just want an opportunity. But if you look at the distribution of the wealth, it's concentrated in certain areas. So there's pockets. And so to his point about depravity, like, yeah, I know. And you'll make a person become so withered, and so whatever case may be, then yes, they got to feed themselves. And so it's unfortunate, it's systemic, but we are making strides toward it. And to Madam Rep's point, I do agree. Now, there is evil. Don't get it wrong. I get the point. But think about it. There's 2% of the people in this county that are actually put in the box by Lieutenant Colonel Pounds. They felonies. They got in trouble. Right? So they're 2%. But out of that 2% that's actually in there, 20% of them are mental health people that should not be in there. So the question is, to your point, we've got to be able to discern the difference, but you got to be able to point them somewhere. The intervention is so important. So I just want to emphasize intervention is key as part of socioeconomic, because again, at the end of the day, we're talking about it, but until you change the way things are distributed, it'll be the same. Thank you.
Okay. I think Ms. Nichols has something.
Ms. Nick?
One of the things that is coming out of research is this idea of upstream interventions, right? At the point that there's an actual crisis, yes, intervention is most necessary at the point of actual crisis. But what are we focusing on for upstream approaches? How are we building pro-social activities for our communities? How are we connecting children to our parks and rec? How are we connecting our children and our families to family resources that would educate them on not just mental health, but how to live in wellness? And that's something I'm extremely passionate about. We're all guaranteed suffering. We're all guaranteed trauma. That's our great unifier. But how are we connecting as a community before there is crisis? How are we educating our families on parenting strategies? How are we connecting our law enforcement before that knock on the door for the arrest? How are we intervening in an upstream way? And I think that's something at the Nichols Center, and even with the CSB, we're looking at strategic ways to invest in our families before the mass shootings. Because if you wait till after, it's too late.
Right.
The innocence is lost. And the trauma that creates is too profound. So what can we do as a community? How can we band together and create an upstream approach to some of these crises?
So the proactive approach versus the reactive.
Yes, absolutely.
And linkage is key, linking them to those resources and the help that they need beforehand. But as you mentioned, we have to find out the root cause or even the issue before it gets to be a crisis.
Which is why places like the Innovation Center are so important.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The places like the Innovation Center and the work that you guys do here is critical. Because you're bringing families together in a way that is positive and preventative and educational and profound. And this is a safe place. The Never Alone Clubhouse, the Nichols Center, the community outreach, those places that are rooted within the community and within the families that provide a place for people to come and feel safe.
And so you also mentioned, Tara, about proactive, the resources. Is there a place where in the community, like the citizens can find resources or a link, a page? Like how would they know where to go for certain resources?
No, that's an excellent question, because that's one of the questions that we get asked so often. There are so many great resources in Douglas County, and 10 years ago when we started the Nichols Center, we were not aware of the resources. We thought they didn't exist. But going to the core meeting, we found actually there's a lot of great nonprofits. There's a lot of great community resources. It's about communication. It's about working together. So one of the new things that's come out is a place called findhelp.org. If you go on to findhelp.org, you can put just about any problem into findhelp.org, and it will provide to you a list of local resources. NAMI is another grassroots national organization that provides mental health resources within the community. The Nichols Center, through partnership with strategic individuals in the community, have created a NAMI chapter for Douglas County. That's an awesome way to get connected. Coming to things like this, watching things like this, making time, connecting with, it boils down to just conversations, word of mouth. I mean, it's so powerful to just communicate with your neighbors and to be friendly.
I just wanted to add, I agree totally with what Tara was saying about being proactive upstream, because the folks that I work with at the Neverland Clubhouse are already caught in that cycle. Usually there are very many things that lead to or cause substance use disorder, but there are so many crimes that are related actually to substance use. And then once you're in that cycle, upon reentry into the community, it's just hard to get ahead. You can't even rent a house. Many times you've lost everything. So many folks end up resorting back to crime because they need money to live. So it's really tough to break that cycle once that you're there. And then the stigma that's associated too with the criminal background and substance use. I mean, it's a true uphill battle for folks. And so the recidivism rate is high. So.
Oh, we had a question in the audience, I believe. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Perspective
about
mental health.
Okay.
So I've been living in this country for many years. I think I have a big voice, but. So I've been living in this country for many years, and based off my research, my observation, I agree that mental health is a big issue. It become an epidemic in the U.S. And it's not just about poverty, not just about money, not just about resources. My big takeaway of this is about, I would say that most of America feel entitled. To me, entitlement is connected to mental health. Good example would be the shooting that happened to, I believe it's Northside a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, because they refused the prescriptions. So the gentleman feel that because he's entitled to have that prescription and went to his car and started shoot people. So what about if the prescription was done? Think about it a different way. So it should not be no shooting. So I believe that a lot of people feel that they're so entitled. If they don't have what they want, therefore, the other route is what they need to do. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Ms. Katrina, did you have anything before we?
Well, one thing that I did want to add that we didn't mention on the panel was that as a community, we really do have to acknowledge those adverse childhood experiences, right? Those ACEs, because those are the building blocks for who we become later in life. And so we have to acknowledge that. And I believe that for us, a community study regarding ACEs would be most helpful to mitigate those factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Completely agree with that.
To that point, and so early intervention, guided prevention, children, guided, the future generation, that's going to take 10, 20, 30 years. How do we deal with the people on the block today? Is there a dual-pronged strategy? In other words, get the kids, but can they both coexist? I'm looking for the experts, or is it that we need to focus on one and not the other?
I think that they have to coexist because from my perspective, from 911, we receive calls from children, we receive calls from parents, adults. So we receive calls from everybody. And so they have to coexist. And I think that when we look at, going back to my earlier point, the adverse childhood experiences, we allow an opportunity to find out what happened in the home with adults. Where are they now? And how does their childhood inform who they become as adults? And then what can we do as a community to mitigate those factors and to assist those families?
And I would want to hear what the experts have to say about that. But what I have noticed is that the more that we talk about mental health, the more that you see younger generation, they are more apt to say, hey, I have depression. Hey, I have some mental illness going on. I think when you talk about the middle age, a little bit more senior citizens, those individuals, it's a stigmatization still with it. But I'm seeing and I'm hearing from mostly young people, and I don't know about those calls I'd be interested at, but if the calls are coming in that are from young people, because they tend to embrace it.
So, as Commissioner Robinson stated, this is a very complex problem. It's not a simple solution. It's not, oh, well, if we do this intervention for this length of time, we will achieve a level of homeostasis that's perfect and wonderful. It's a highly complex problem, and we've been working as a community on this problem for a very long time. You know, this is not new information. He's been doing this panel for 8 years, right? And so the idea is yes and yes. We have to help the families. We have to help the individuals, the children. We have to support your school teachers. You have to provide the studies. You also have to help the parents. You know, as to Cindy's point, you have adults who are living in this world carrying the shame of being told that they chose to have the disorder that they currently have. They chose to live that life and walk that out. And there's more people on this earth that would be willing to shame someone who chose to use drugs and than those that would line up to help them and to support them. And so you have to support those individuals because that's not a choice. No one ever as a child grows up and says, you know what I want to be when I grow up. You know, I just want to be a drug addict and be a felon and make my life harder than it already is. It's the way we process get through this life. And this life is hard. It's hard for everyone. And those individuals that have the support to make different choices because their family didn't abandon them or didn't abuse them or didn't leave them or you know, they had the support that they needed, those individuals had the ability to make different choices. But we've got parents who are parenting children when they weren't parented. And one of the bravest things to do as a person is to do something that you have no idea what you're doing. You know, I had good parents, but I still don't know what I'm doing half the time, you know? Parenting is hard. And if we're not supporting the families, if we're not challenging our families to adopt a sense of community and morals and identity that's rooted in what is good, then no matter what we throw at this problem, it won't succeed. You have to help both.
I completely agree. And to your question too, Commissioner Robinson, about how do we get them now? Where do we go? You know, as Representative Alexander said, for the younger generation, it's normalized. That's what's going on with mental health right now. It's normalized for them. It's on social media. It's in the schools. It's being said and taught by their friends. So for them, this is normal. Everyone deals with it. Everyone has some situation or issues that they're struggling with. So for me, when I say it, I'm saying like as a younger person, when they will say, for me, if I have depression or if I have anxiety, that's okay. But for the older generation, the middle-aged generation, we were taught not to say what happened in the house. What happens in the house stays in the house. We were taught not to say, I'm not okay. Like that's what we were learned, what we were taught growing up. So I think if we keep this going, your forums that you have, and we have these conversations with others, we normalize the mental health, we normalize the trauma, we normalize like everyone has these situations, and there's someone who relates to me. Someone has been through what I've been through, so now I can share. It's a safe place for them. So I think if we start there and make it a safe place, we can start seeing a difference.
Some of the things, though, that I'm finding as a mental health therapist, and I work a lot with the younger population, the things that they struggle with, it's not accepting the fact that they have mental health issues or that their brain is tired or that life is hard. It's that they don't know how to push through the hardship. They don't know how to handle the cell phone, the social, the expectations of the school, the tests, the college expectation. They don't know how to push through and how to live life on life's terms. And that, no matter whether you admit that you have mental health or you don't, life on life's terms is hard. And we're still not seeing, I think, the correct response to helping our youth adopt skills that allow them to juggle all that we try to juggle in this extremely fast-paced hustle mentality that we live in.
Can I add to that point, just dig a little bit deeper? Again, depression, the younger generation versus the older. The older is seasoned, they've seen enough moons and cycles and stuff, and so they're toughened to a certain extent, or they contain it, they struggle. The younger generation is much more freer, they're more open and so forth. So, but do we see, all right, so if of the seniors, the youth, because at the end of the day, while we're giving them resources, there are some that don't make it. How do we address that group right there? Like they're right on the edge, and you guys are the therapists, so I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm trying to frame it. So can you help me?
Yes, so my experience with the youth that are experiencing that sense of hopelessness, it is adopting an idea of nihilism, that nothing matters anyway. So no matter how hard I try, life's going to be hard and nothing matters anyway, right? Whereas your older generation, I think, and they still struggle with suicide. You know, we're seeing our suicide numbers shift. But your older generation, I think some of them still have faith that the things that they do, the purpose they have in life, they've lived long enough to adopt a sense of purpose that there are things that matter. But I think everything's so disconnected, everything's so social, that it's hard for them to imagine that their life matters in the first place.
The younger generation are more resilient than what we think they are. They figure it out. For them to be able to admit it is the first start. Once they do that, they figure out a way, and they deal with it. That is what I'm hearing. I talk to the younger people. They will adapt to it. Believe me, they are very much more resilient on how they deal with health.
Hi. Well, well, thank you all for everything that you all have done to serve our youth. My name's Corey Thomas. I served 23 years in the military. And after I transitioned out of the military, here's one of the things that I learned. I was going through an identity crisis myself. I served in the military. I lived up under the military's purpose for 23 years, and transitioning out, I did not know who Corey Thomas was. And I'm noticing as I went through that transition, I watched a lot of our kids go through this identity crisis. But what I've learned also is our educators, our parents, and and a lot of our leaders, they're teaching them the wrong skills to teach the kids. We have to now recalibrate our leadership skills. A course that I took that helped me, neuro-linguistic programming. We have to now program our kids with better words that attach different emotions to it, so that they can now start to wear that emotion and feel a different type of way. But if our leaders if we keep using the same terminology that we're using with our youth, I assure you, we're going to get the same results. We have to change the terminology, and as we do that, we have to retrain our educators and, like I said, our leaders also with different programs. I'll be willing to share these programs with you all because it helped me. And I know I was very, very successful in the military, and I was able to self-analyze myself going through the process, and now able to help a lot of our youth around the community. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
So, and I agree with you, Corey. It's definitely identity crisis. A lot of our kids, they do not know who they are, where they're going, who they're supposed to be. They get their identity through social media, through their friends, through other people versus internally. Like, who am I? Where am I going? Who am I supposed to be? What do I want to be? They don't ask themselves these questions. And then going back to the leaders, are we asking those questions to our youth? Our teachers asking these questions? Our counselors? Who's asking these questions to them? Because if it's their friends, the conversation is going to be a whole lot different if it's an adult.
So I'm going to speak as a mother now.
Okay.
So as a mother, I think though they may not necessarily know who they are, but I think that it's also important to give them the space to figure it out, because they are thinkers, and I hope that we raise them to be thinkers and to figure it out. But as parents, I know for my own children, I give them the space. My husband and I give them the space to figure it out. And we also are there to support them through that journey, however that journey looks. Because, as Tara said, life, and life is on a continuum. And so as they go through different things, there are ebbs and flows, just like in our own lives. And so
Yes. Definitely need support. Or you haven't.
That is so true. One of the things that we teach our parents now is at a certain age, they have to transition to as hard as they want. And if you start programming, I'm going to be your coach at this age, and I'm going to coach you through your transition. I've learned that soft skills today, they're not exactly what these kids need. They need survival skills. They're on the internet challenging themselves every day. I can teach them something. I can give them head knowledge right in this room, and they can walk out and get on social media, and it can get disrupted. So we have to use different techniques to program them, and it takes a while. I'm telling you, I'm out there with them. I went to the worst school in Birmingham, Alabama, and the teachers talked to me after the training and said, I don't understand how you got them to listen to you for a whole hour. I said, you just got to change the language. Coaches, parents, if you got kids, become coaches to your kids. Just say, hey, I just want to coach you, and watch how your kid look up at you. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. So I want to, because I know we got on a conversation about our youth also, but I kind of want to go back to Lieutenant Pounds, if that's okay, and to ask you a question about in the jail. What type of mental health issues or situations have you encountered, or are you guys encountering in Douglas County Jail?
The first thing you got to realize is that the state hospitals have closed, so your jails and your prisons are pretty much your mental hospitals. So I was talking to the nurse earlier today, and she said that she estimates about 80% of our population have dealt with, and this is what is known, they're not diagnosed, but 80% estimated that dealt with mental health issues. So with all that being said, so you got one person that works we got a mental health floor, so to speak, or a medical floor. And most of those people are mental health. So you got to think about the toll it takes on someone that's working that floor for 12 hours. Walking back and forth and listening to people yell and scream and hearing voices and talking to themselves and putting fecal matter on themselves, throwing out urine up under the door. There's a lot that they have to deal with. So that can take a toll on the officer as well.
When we go back to legislation, one of the things that we did pass, and this came up from my study committee years ago, back in 2016. So I know that a lot of the individuals that go into the jail system come out, lose their identification, don't have it. Some of the homeless people don't have it. We did pass a bill that those individuals can now go to the Department of Corrections, and there is a card that has been identified for them to have when they lose their identification card. So good bill, one that I said I tried to push way back in 2016, but it just got passed this year.
I want to add to your point, trying to avoid going in the boxes, I call it. And again, I go back to our accountability courts and our judges that were involved in helping bring that online. In other words, like, okay, well, I don't have to go in there if I go through this program, this set of rules to avoid that. Can anybody speak to the accountability court specifically and its success so far? I mean, what are you seeing? Do you have anything?
Yeah, with the CSB, we do work with the accountability courts, our adult accountability courts, in addition to Chance Court, which is for our juvenile. What we have seen is, as long as there is that proper linkage to some type of community support or help, that there is success in the accountability courts. So like, for example, we have them to come through the CSB a lot. And it could be someone who's in Hope Court, which is our mental health court, or even drug court. And they come to the CSB for that service, but they're not only getting the service for the help, they're getting the education. So we're also teaching them. So they're learning about their mental health illness. They're learning about substance abuse. They are getting groups. So they're with other people who have the same struggles and the same situations, so they don't feel alone. And I think as long as we're all working together, and it's not just accountability court providing services and doing one thing, CSB providing services doing another, the Nickel Center is on one side doing nothing, Never Alone is on the other side doing another. If we're all coming together, bridging that gap, and we're working together in that circle, complete that cycle, I think that is what's going to help continue to make that a success.
I really wanted to hone in on something that Lieutenant Colonel Pounds spoke about. So we talk about the trauma that our responders face. And so from a 911 perspective, 911 serves as your first responder, right? So when folks call and they have suicidal ideation, overdose, and just any other types of calls, you have those 911 operators who are on those lines every day, all day, who are processing that. And that often leads to vicarious trauma. And so with that, I think that it's important to let the community know that Douglas County 911 actually signed a memorandum of understanding with the Community Services Board to have a licensed clinical social worker inside of the 911 center. And so the person serves twofolds. First of all, to assist with those calls so that someone whose professional lane it is can actually field those calls when folks call and they are in crisis. And secondly, to support my staff and our team of folks, because as they process these calls, they go back home to their own families. And so we want to make sure that when they go back home to their own families, that they are whole for the folks that love them.
And self-care, definitely. We have to take care of ourselves, especially when we're dealing with this population, because it's a lot. And, you know, even for us at the CSB, we see and hear a lot that comes in from the community. So if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't help the community. We can't be of service to them. I know we have a question from the floor, but before I go into it, I do have a question for Katrina and Lieutenant Pounds. How does your staff take care of themselves and handle when you guys are dealing with these mental health situations on a daily basis, sometimes 24/7? How does your staff take care of themselves?
So that is a very loaded question, actually. But we're doing better. So years ago in 911, and I've been in 911 I've been in public safety for over 20 years in my life. And so years ago, it just wasn't talked about. And so now what we're seeing is we're understanding that it needs to be. And so for a lot of our 911 centers, we're establishing quiet rooms, a room for our employees to go and just decompress. There's no television in there, there's soft lighting so that they can decompress. We have adult coloring books. We also have kinetic sand. Just those sensory things that allow them to be able to ground after they experience a traumatic call or not, because just in the regular course of a day, they may experience anything. And just, I like numbers. And so one of the things that I would just like to share is last year, we fielded 409 suicide or suicide threats or ideation calls in Douglas County 911 and 166 overdose calls. And so that's a lot for a community our size. And so
we got people that work in the jail and also the people that's working on the streets that see traumatic events every day, dead bodies. I'm sorry to be so blunt about it, but that's what it is, And even inside the jail sometimes you see people that commit suicide or maybe have some health issues and they may pass away right there in jail. So we have to be careful about watching our people and paying attention. As supervisors, we have to pay attention to our people, make sure they're not being burned out. And we do offer an employee assistance program. We also have a peer support team that they're actually going to classes and doing the training so that they can assist with our people as well as other agencies if they experience a traumatic event. But the main thing is just to, pay attention to your people. Go out there and make sure your people are okay. And if you see any kind of signs of them not being okay, then you need to get them away from that situation until they can, like you said, decompress for a while and just to get their minds off things. We got a gym. They did no gym membership. We allow them to go to the gym, 3 times a week while they're on duty, just to burn off some stress or some steam that they may have experienced during the week. So there are several things that we do, but the main thing, again, is to just pay attention to your people.
And one thing, to your point about acknowledging these two public services, I do appreciate what you guys do in your teams. It's real. This ain't snapped. This ain't Fatal Attraction. This ain't commercialized. And I watched that stuff, and it'd take me 3 hours to get off of it. Get out my system. I went to sleep with that. But what you guys really, really do, the dark side, the backside of humanity, and the people who are committed to doing it. I mean, it's not about a lot of people that want to do that, and ones who do it. The ones who do it, do it. And I really appreciate what you guys do as the unsung heroes and stuff. So can we give them a hand clap, guys, for thanking them? Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Commissioner Robinson and Lieutenant Colonel Pound stated in regards to the mental health within the jail. We actually have a reentry program that goes into Douglas County Jail where we connect them to services before release. We also partnership with the accountability courts where they call us for those who have not been released yet that will be released. So we identify those needs up front and filter them into the services. And I don't think it's well known that we do that where we capture those individuals and filter them into services before release.
I'm sorry, what's your name, just for the record, and who?
I'm Nakia Boyd. I'm the Community Integrated Services Program Manager over at Douglas County Community Service Board, and I actually oversee that program which we go into the jails.
So yes, we are definitely trying to, as Tara mentioned before, upstream. That's that proactive piece of going into the jail, providing that service, helping them, linking them to a community resource before they're even released, because that reduces that recidivism, because when they get out, they don't have the resources. They may not have housing. They don't have anyone to support them. So having that one person who they've been working with while they've been incarcerated, who is there when they get out to say, hey, I'm here for you. Meet me at the CSB. Be here at this time. Let's get your appointment set up. And it just continues the service of going. And so that is our goal, to reduce that recidivism. That's why we have the reentry program. That's why we have the co-responders program, because we want to get in there before it becomes a crisis. Yeah.
So something that Lieutenant Pound said, he talked about a peer program within the Sheriff's Department. Last year, the Nichols Center piloted a peer suicide intervention training program for the community, free to the community. And This year, we're doing a trauma-informed resiliency training for our Douglas County Fire and EMS. And every Wednesday, we're teaching trauma-informed resiliency. But that peer piece of like what you said, I'm going to keep an eye on the person next to me. And when I know that the situation, and I know that what, if I was going through what they might be going through, I might not be okay. And so I'm going to have that conversation with them and say, hey, are you okay? Do you need to step away? I've got your back. Because of shared lived experience, right, which is what you guys do at the Never Logan Clubhouse, because of shared lived experience, that peer program is incredible. And I think that goes back to our original conversation today about talking about being a community, talking about understanding how somebody else might be feeling, walking in similar shoes. And I think that is the way forward, is to be able to look at the person standing next to us and saying, you know, I can talk all day about my anxiety or my depression or what I deal with, but I want to know what's going on with you. And being open-hearted and available for that kind of conversation, so many people are afraid to ask that question. They're afraid to ask, are you okay? Are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you struggling? What's going on with you? Because we don't want to trigger somebody or to offend someone or to imply something, but that's the human thing to do. And so if anyone's watching this, if you take anything away, ask those questions. Pay attention to the person standing next to you, because we're all going through this together. So.
To that point, I'm going to share a personal story to that point. And I'm going to ask the question to the experts, is it gender specific, how women communicate and how men communicate? So this has to be about 20 years ago, and one of my fraternity brothers had family issues with his brother, and he decided to take his life in order to protect his brother. And it stunned us. And as close as we are as a frat, and we talked about this probably 2 weeks ago when we all got together, as we normally do for other reasons, but his name always comes up. How did we miss that? Like, I get all this, we're supposed to be educating all this and that.
Right.
We missed it.
Right. And I think that it goes back to, we're so busy looking for signs. We're so consumed with, oh, well, do I see the sign? I was listening, I didn't see the sign, that we forget to look at the circumstances. Right. You know, we forget to look at you know, and people are so good at keeping their own suffering quiet and not sharing how they feel. And I think that if we shared more, if we opened up to each other more, we would find out that we're actually a lot of us are the same. You know, we might process it differently, we might handle it differently, but we have more in common than we don't.
And I think you hit it on the nail too, Tara, when you said a lot of times we don't see the signs. There are no signs. You know, they don't show any signs, especially when you look at the difference between how men communicate, how females communicate. Females are more open to share. I'm hurting, I'm down, I have anxiety, I'm just not having a good day. We're more open to share, where a man has that, nope, I gotta stay strong. I'm gonna be strong. I'm not gonna share what is going on with me. So a lot of times you won't see that sign. And you have some females who are strong as well, and they will not share and they keep it to themselves. And then something happens and you're like, wait, I didn't see that coming. I didn't know you were feeling that way. I didn't know she was sad. I didn't know she was depressed. It happens where we'll keep it to ourselves because we don't want someone to see us as weak. And that's a weakness for some people. They view sharing their emotions, sharing how they feel, is that weakness. So you can't say we missed that sign. How did we miss it? Because sometimes there wasn't a sign to see to miss.
I understand.
Oh, have questions?
I just wanted to say that a lot of it has to go back with Corey saying it's the language. And as Cindy just said, some women are strong and they don't share. Well, the language is, if you're strong, you don't share. But the truth is, if you're really strong, you're strong enough to share. But our language is backwards in that. It's because that's what our community has taught us all this time. but a supportive community will give us a safe space to be able to share and to be able to make mistakes and to be able to be human with each other. Because we're not just watchers of signs, we're human beings relating to other human beings, and that's where you're going to find it. If we're all holding hands, we're going to notice a hand that's shaking.
And one of the things I like to add, I have a client that I was working with, and these guys, they meet up every morning at 6 o'clock to go out to do traffic control. And what I brought to them was just coming out and giving the guys a hug and telling them I love them. A lot of our young men today, they don't get that growing up. They get, I got to be tough, I got to be strong. But nobody's, as a genuine man, just goes up to them and says, hey, come here. Hug them and genuinely tell them you love them and you appreciate them. That's one of the parts that's missing with a lot of our managers that's at these jobs. And I know there's a thin line between it, but right now we got to change the techniques up a little bit. Our managers have to be a little bit more genuine in their handling of these youth, because they are struggling with a lot of things that's going. They're at information overload right now, and so the simple things is, like God just said, the love and the language, it will help them go a long way. All right, I'm gonna sit down after this.
So we'll do one last question, and then we'll go into our next round. But for everyone on the panel, how can we, as Douglas County, what we call here at the CSB, One Douglas, how as One Douglas can we assist our citizens and the community in getting them the resources that they need without that stigma attached to it? How can we together help our citizens?
I guess a question is, do they even know that these resources are available? And are they, to your point, what are the different mechanisms of access? I mean, because most things are online, it's private. I guess it's confidential. I mean, how does it work? How is information shared? As opposed to walking in the door to DFACS or to some support group and everybody can see me, is there's ways that I can enter in until I get strong enough that I don't really care what people think I'm getting help. I'm asking, I don't have an answer for that.
Ms. Katrina?
Yes, please.
Well, of course, if anyone, with my professional lane, if anyone is having or experiencing an emergency, dial 911. However, there may be some instance where a person doesn't feel like they need to elevate to 911. 988 was an easily remembered number that was created so that folks could call 988 so that they could speak with someone. So 988 is also available if someone is having crisis, and that's a resource. So you put the resources out there.
I agree with putting the resources out there. Education is key. And for me in the Never Alone Clubhouse, one thing that we do is speak up. A major goal of ours is to remove the stigma. We are a peer-led organization, so everyone at our organization has experienced substance use disorder with co-occurring mental health issues. So the more I talk about my issues, and trust me, that was really hard for me. I had to drop a lot of walls because I was a strong woman that did not talk about my issues because I did not want to be vulnerable. So now I do speak out loud as often as I can to let people know we'll find you a support group of, whatever you need. The big thing is connection. Connection is the opposite of addiction, the opposite of the struggle. You've got to connect with someone. And so that's the big thing, I think, is education.
I would say that, I absolutely agree. I think and through trainings and support, you can connect someone to a, I do think that it is about getting the word out, but the police department, the sheriff's department, we're doing these community days, we're putting information out there. The real question, though, is how do we say it to where the families can hear it? Because they're not able to hear it all the time. And so being able, like you guys all, if each one of us went and told 5 people and asked them to tell 5 more people, like that is how you share. And we have those open-hearted, those vulnerable conversations that says, hey, I'm struggling, and this is what I'm going through. I really believe that that's the way forward with communication.
All right. Oh, you have something, Lieutenant?
I think we're on the right path. You got to have more forums and more activities and things of this nature, but and you do have to educate the people about the resources that are available, and a lot of people may not know. But talking is just one part of it. You actually have to do some interaction with these people in order to get them on the right track. And to be honest with you, some of these people think they don't have any problems. It's self-denial, and they won't even accept it because they think they're good.
Yeah.
When you see something totally different, so it's not going to work on everybody, but our goal, or the goal is to, to help people, So we could talk about it all night long, but that's not going to bring anybody closer to getting away from a crisis or anything like that. So we have to be in action as well as talk about it and educate these people on the resources that are available in the county.
I agree, definitely. Well, thank you, everyone on this site, your expertise, your knowledge of all the conversations and questions that we've had. Before we end and before I give Commissioner Robinson his final words, I would like Representative Alexander for you to share more information about the budget that we have here within the state.
Okay, drum roll. How much money we spend for behavioral health? So I brought the budget so you guys could look at it and see when we're in session, this is what we pass. It's huge. So this is what occurred with the FY 2024 budget as it relates to mental health. And I got all this information from House Budget and Research, shared me all this information, so it's a lot of information. I want to tell you, I've been in session and I've been a legislator for 11 years, so I have never, ever seen as many vetoes that we had with the budget this go round. We also had something called a disregarded. Disregarded. So there was $236 million in cuts vetoed by the governor. Over 134 lines out of that budget, what I just showed you guys, that was disregarded by the governor. What does that mean? It means that although the General Assembly allocate this amount of money to go to this agency, that the governor can say disregard that. So the money still stays there with that agency. However, it can't be spent the way that we allocated it for it to be spent. So let me tell you what those things are, because it's mostly in the mental health. $24 million that would have went toward funding for those 24 beds to get those individuals out of jail, get them into bed. Funding for crisis centers. We have crisis centers across the state. We have Fulton County, Dublin, and we have Augusta. It's a 24-bed and 16 temporary observation chairs. So that was $24 million that was allocated for that. That was disregarded. $10.1 million to boost the pay of psychiatric hospital workers. Disregarded. $3.9 million to fill vacant forensic evaluator and peer mentor positions and provide pay raises. Disregarded. $1.9 million provided for an additional 250 slots in the housing voucher program. $1 million for the funding for the multi-agency treatment for children teams that would ensure that children receive the mental health care they need. $650,000 was provided for agency operations to fund various personnel and administrative support. There was also some money that was going toward the 988 call center. I believe it was about $2.3 million. That was to provide for the program and administrative support for the 988 suicide hotline that you guys heard about earlier. The justification for this regard is that funds would not increase the services that people are calling into the crisis center. It is overload. it has increased. And so they are modeling this, the 988 center and the call center that we have here in Georgia is being modeled all over across the United States. So there are other states talking about what we're doing as it relates to that center. So that 2.3 million that we allocated, they will definitely need that as it moves forward. So that's some of the things as it relates to the budget and the things that were disregarded.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That was a lot of disregarded items that is needed, but thank you. All right, well, I will yield the floor to Commissioner Robinson for his closing remarks.
All right, well, thank you for that. I'm just going to piggyback behind Madam State Rep Alexander. Douglas County, that's the state, but locally, we recognize how important the Community Service Board was. There is a belief within the Board of Commissioners that government is limited, but there are partners that are out there that we can leverage. You guys already have the infrastructure, you already have that capacity and stuff, and we just need to get behind it to a certain extent. So last year, the board reappropriated, $2.5 million for CSB to continue operations and obviously supplement the things you guys are providing from the state. So we're doing our part, but is the need great though, guys? I mean, is there a need? I mean, the question becomes, is there capacity? Do you have reporting? Are we making a difference with what we're doing? We're giving money. We get it. The state's giving money. But can we quantify that and show that, okay, do we need to go more? Are we doing this right? And so that's some of the conversation we'll need to have going forward. But I won't belabor this because it's not a budget meeting. We'll take up that this summer. But nonetheless, what I do want to acknowledge for all y'all being here, for anybody who are service providers that hadn't spoken yet, can we get a mic so they can introduce themselves? Just for the
Sure.
record, I just got to acknowledge, I mean, you guys know how I do. I'm very inclusive. And so you just pass the mic around, just say your name and your organization, and we appreciate you guys being here and what you do. Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Ort Curry. I'm with the Villages of Brookmont. Also, I'm a work with the organization Clippers and Cops, bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community. And I am prior law enforcement and prior military. And this platform here should be, shared around with so many people in the community because there's so many activists out here that really needs to hear this. And we also need to see what they're cutting, because when election time come up, we need to say, hey, these are things that we definitely need. And being a person who has been in the military, been in those peer groups, been in those mentorship programs, we definitely need that. So I'll pass the mic on now.
Thank you for being here. Yes.
Hold up.
Just organization and your name and
Organization.
just for the record, because that's what it's about, connecting resources. Please. It's okay.
Good afternoon. I guess good evening at this point. My name is Julia Are, and I am the CEO and the lead consultant of Julia Are Consulting, and it's a organization focused on community development, organizational development, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one thing that was missing from the conversation today is the equity and the diversity part of what mental health looks like. We know it's not created equally for everyone, and we know it shows up differently in everyone, such as depression in Black women. It looks very different than it looks like in everyone else. So as we continue to have these conversations, let's think about the diverse effects and how we can be inclusive and equitable when it comes to mental health.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank
for
you.
being here. Absolutely.
Are there any other organizations?
We're good?
We're good.
Madam Vice Chair, please, then it closes out. I've got to yield, guys. You just said equity and inclusion and diversity, and so I got to share the floor.
Well, thank you for sharing this. One of the things that I really am overwhelmed with what you said, probably 80% of the population that you all have in the jail has some type of mental health or behavioral health issue, and that our jails have really become hospitals. You hear that. You hear it, but you don't really internalize it until you just spoke how you did about what people who are employed there are actually having to deal with, right? So it goes back to what the young man Corey was saying in terms of how do we now turn the terms around? How do we use the language? And even in getting young people to understand that even in law enforcement, that there is humanization, that there is empathy that is needed, right? So maybe we need to start, because we need more law enforcement, right? We do. We don't have enough. We need more mental health professionals. We do. We don't have enough. And as they're going through these traumas, we need to let them know we need you. We need you because we now see that you understand and now you can help somebody else. So whether it's a law enforcement, you don't have to go out and arrest somebody, but if you see somebody having an issue, right, how can you help them so that they don't end up in jail, right? So I think we really have to start changing the terminology. So you hit something right there that really spoke to me, and thank you for putting it in layman's terms. So I hope we all got, something really out of it. Again, I go back to my first statement. It's about community. It doesn't matter, the title. It doesn't matter, how you show up and how you dress up. At the end of the day, we are all neighbors, and we are only as healthy as the neighbor that lives next to us. And this county can only be wealthy if we have a healthy community. So it's important that the Board of Commissioners has invested the money that we have in our veterans and our mental health and in CSB and all of the partners that have come beside CSB to help this, right? So I hope this continues. Thank you, Commissioner Robinson, for doing this, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. All right, and since we're doing hand claps, can we thank the panel for being here, guys? Thank you, guys. And also, I have to acknowledge Ms. Sandra Williams. Thank you, and thank you, Director Ray Leifer, who's not here, for putting this on for us. Thank you so much. Let's give her a hand clap. Thank you for allowing us to borrow this building. Any closing remarks before I close this?
I am good.
Okay. With that being said, Douglas County, thank you so much for coming out to the Douglas County 8th Annual Mental Health Forum. My name is Kelly Robinson. Good evening.
Thank you.